Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 146, EA Played. I am Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this is a podcast about gaming of all genres, platforms, and generations from the perspective of a dad and a nerd with the occasional friend stopping by. Please take a moment to subscribe to and rate this podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. This episode, we are going to talk about EA Play updates, PlayStation State of Play, Xbox marketing, Nintendo Switch OLED, Assassin's Creed Live Service, the new Escape from Tarkov patch, and Windows 11. First, I want to thank our Patreon supporters this month: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Tim, PK, Man Made Golf, Lunchbox, and Dale. If you would like to support this podcast and my other eventual content, please check out patreon.com/bondiesel. Okay, let's jump right into it. So EA Play. So we found out a few things. So we already pretty much knew that Battlefield 2042 would be a big topic. It's probably going to be the main topic for this EA Play that's happening in the next week or two. We also always assume that we're going to get the FIFA, the Madden. A couple things have been pointed out and clarified, though. We now know that Mass Effect and Andromeda and Dragon Age will not be showcased at all, or at least they say. So we should assume that that's a thing. We also know it's been rumored that they're rebooting an old franchise. Now, that hasn't been confirmed yet, and the franchise hasn't been confirmed, but there's a lot of rumors or suggestion out there right now that it's going to be Dead Space. That is interesting, and we'll talk about why in a moment. The last bit that is personally interesting to me is that there's also a possibility they may drop some kind of teaser for us about NCAA football returning. So if there's anyone listening who's not into American football or just not into American sports at all, this won't mean much to you. But to someone like me, NCAA college football, the last one they did was 2000, I think it was 14, I'm pretty sure, which would have actually come out in 2013, I believe. And so it's been 8 years. That game in its later years, unfortunately, kind of stalled out the way that Madden sort of has or does. But to this day, I will argue that NCAA football, EA NCAA football 2006 is one of the greatest RPGs ever made. And the reason is, without going into too long of an explanation, is that it has, in my opinion, the single best soundtrack to a video game, or one of them ever, of not original music. So it's all licensed music, but that game before 2006 and after, its main soundtrack was school fight songs played by the school bands, which is really cool. For whatever reason, in 2006, they got this bizarre soundtrack of like alt rock and ska and a bunch of these songs that to this day I still remember like word by word. On top of that, the reason I think it's such calling it an RPG is maybe a bit much, but the dynasty mode in that game is you become a first-year head coach at any school you pick. I would always pick small, crappy schools and build them up, or build them up and then move to bigger jobs, which is in the game. That's schools recruit you and such. And you, of course, you play, the 10, 11 football games, that's the whole point of the game, but that's really only like a half or a third of the game. The rest of it is recruiting, training, and the more you use your players in the games, the more their stats go up. Some players have a higher ceiling than others, but you don't know until you actually play them and train them. Um, you recruit high school kids, fictional ones, of course, to your school, to you as a coach, and there's attributes about the way you play and the way you manage your team, and the way that you talk to them and interact with them that determines whether or not they come to yours. And you're also competing with the 100+ other schools that are also doing the same thing. It's a great game. It's a great franchise, and there's something that's more pure or more there's just something about the college football game that's just, in my opinion, just more enticing than pro, even though I actually prefer the NFL in real life, but from a gaming perspective I definitely prefer the college game. And I like college football as well. But beyond that, the news about Mass Effect and Dragon Age is a little surprising. I figured that Mass Effect wouldn't show up again after the teaser last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we get another teaser for N7 Day this year, but we'll have to wait and see. That's November 7th. Dragon Age surprises me, though, because I would say that it not being there all but confirms that Dragon Age is not coming next year, which is actually what I was predicting. Now, I was predicting Dragon Age 4 would come in 2022, mostly selfishly, because I was hoping that may mean that Mass Effect 4, or whatever it's going to be called, would be coming in like 2024 or something like that. So I think that's probably not happening. So I would push both of those back a year. I'm going to guess that Dragon Age is coming 2023, and that the next Mass Effect will probably be more around 2025, but we'll have to wait and see. So it's a little bit of a bummer. I'm sure we'll get lots of teases and stuff in the meantime of both of those games. I'm not really into Dragon Age. I don't like medieval stuff or medieval aesthetic things, but that's fine. It doesn't matter. I have still thought about playing those old games though, because I know they have kind of a similar feel to Mass Effect, obviously. So we'll see, maybe. And then the Battlefield focus, I don't really care about Madden and FIFA and stuff. I like FIFA a lot, actually. I actually like Madden as well. I just can't be bothered to keep up with them, because when the new one comes out and I can play it for free or as part of Game Pass, then I'll do it. Otherwise, I don't really care. But Battlefield, I'm so excited about that game. I'm really hoping this reveal is going to include them announcing that it's going to be on Game Pass. I really think that game, it's going to, even if it's just console Game Pass, which I don't think they would put on PC through the Xbox Game Pass PC app. They want people to buy it through Origin, and they want PC players to buy it. But I'm really excited about Battlefield, and I'm also horrified because I worry that the idea of like people having to pay $70 for a multiplayer only game in a day and age where we have free to play BRs that are of the quality of Apex and Fortnite and Warzone, it's just going to be a hard sell to get people to pay $70 for a game. Now, my argument is that it's worth every penny, because those BRs all provide a similar experience, right? They provide an experience that is, battle, now Battlefield's going to have battle passes and stuff, of course, but I just really think that there isn't an appreciation right now for like the squad based, objective based, open world, giant map, lots of players gameplay that Battlefield provides. There's no other game that does it. Other games have tried, for sure. Even the big team battle and was it, I think it's Halo, and whatever the giant vehicle including version of Warzone is. MAG tried to do it. There's World War III tried to, and came the closest to remaking that experience, but none of them can do it. And the reason is, in my opinion, is that Battlefield has a really cool mix of a realistic aesthetic, a realistic world, things that look real, things that you really see in real life, mixed with being willing to sacrifice realism for fun to the extreme. in a big way. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, there's a lot of silly mechanics. Every soldier has an unlimited parachute. You can pull your parachute 3 different times in one life in Battlefield. And while that isn't realistic, it's not realistic at all. It is fun, and it makes the gameplay. It's a focus on gameplay and a respect for gameplay, which is really important. You I played Tarkov, which I'll talk a bit about later in the show, but that game is in such a weird spot right now with its fan base, where you can tell there's a lot of people who have been playing it for a long time, who were sold originally on this idea of this like hyper realistic survival game. And what has happened is, over time, I think that game has shown that it's become very popular. And I think the devs are adjusting and realizing that they may need to sacrifice some of those original hyper realistic ideas for more gameplay oriented things and more fun things and engaging things. If you play a game like Arma isn't even that realistic, but it's I assume, and from my knowledge, it's the most realistic military game you can play from an aesthetic and a gameplay point of view. Every single key on your keyboard does stuff, and not only that, but every many combinations of keys do stuff in that game. And Arma is cool, but it's very exhausting. Now there's tons of mods and stuff that are different, but the base game of Arma is an example of like, why realistic isn't always the best move. So with Battlefield 2042, I love the near future setting. We've already seen, I expect to see a lot of Division-ish tech in this game. You could tell from the trailers they've shown already that there's like the gun dogs, like the robot dogs and stuff like that. I'm expecting to see a bunch of like wacky stuff like that. And because it's set in the near future, 20-ish years from now, it's able to do that. They can kind of justify, you have to realize that, DARPA, only lets us see their creations like 30 years after they've created them. So stuff that we think is cutting edge today is probably very far behind, and we won't know for a long time, if ever. So EA Play, I'm excited. I am a little bit bummed out about there being no Mass Effect or Dragon Age. I'm also really happy, and happy for them that they came out and just told people ahead of time. Battlefield, I'm super excited to see more of and finally play. I'd love to see some NCAA football. I am curious about Dead Space. The Dead Space thing is kind of interesting because the original developers have their own studio and put out, I think it was last year, a trailer for a game that is basically just new Dead Space. So it's going to be kind of weird if they have both, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure we'll see some stuff from like Apex. I would really just absolutely adore, and I know it's not happening, but a Titanfall 3, even a teaser, even if it's like 4 or 5 years away, just give us a wink, but we'll see. I'll have to see what's going on with Apex. I haven't played that in a bit. I got a little bit burned out from trying to really grind this current battle pass. So we'll have to see. Okay, the next topic is the PlayStation State of Play. So this was an interesting one because they came out real early and were like, hey, this is going to be gameplay of Deathloop and some other stuff. This is not going to be Ragnarok. This is not going to be, any big new announcements. This is going to be Deathloop, again, for the billionth time, and some other stuff. And that's exactly what it was. It was some more gameplay, even though I don't think it was actually new gameplay of Deathloop. And then like a bunch of indie games and some updates to other games that we already knew about or are already out. I believe Death Stranding got a little bit more detail about its director's cut, which looks like it's just a bunch of things that weren't finished for the main game, and they put in a bunch of new stuff, which if that game's your jam, then there you go. It's great. The Deathloop thing, that game, to me, I see it hyped a lot. I'm a big Kind of Funny fan. I listen to most of their content, and they're just like riding that game's balls. Like, I'm sure Deathloop's gonna be cool, but it seems like it seems like the type of game that a lot of talking heads, they're so deep into the hype of it now that even if it comes out and it's like okay, they'll still like ride its nuts because They have to, because they hyped it up so much. For me, as an Xbox fan, primarily a fan of all games, I have no animosity towards Nintendo or Sony. I just don't have their consoles. Deathloop's weird because if you don't know, the developer who makes Deathloop is was part of that Bethesda deal or the ZeniMax deal. So what's happening is that in the next couple of weeks, Xbox Game Studios, it's actually probably going through ZeniMax, is publishing at least a. I don't know if they've actually said whether or not it's time exclusive or not, or permanent. But Xbox Game Studio is releasing a game on PlayStation 4 and 5, and it will be exclusive to those platforms at least for a while. This is obviously because this game was in development long before the Bethesda Microsoft deal happened, and Microsoft was very clear about honoring the agreements that were made. Especially ones happening not long after the transition here. So this kind of reminds me of like MLB The Show a little bit, where basically the MLB told Sony that in order to keep the MLB license and keep making that game, they need to put it on multiple platforms. So that's why now you can start up a game that's on Game Pass also. So there's a Sony Studio game is on Xbox Game Pass. And when you start that game up, Sony Santa Monica or whatever pops up, Sony something, whatever studio it is. It's really odd. It's weird times we live in, but it's really great. I saw some disappointment with that state of play. I think the thing that people need to realize is that like Xbox is in the game of winning people over right now. And we'll talk about this next actually, but Xbox's goals are a lot different than Sony or even Nintendo, because Sony is they know what they are. They know their status. They know what people think of them, and they know that they don't really have a lot to prove. Now, I think that's eventually going to bite them in the butt. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, but I do think that there's a sense of arrogance that Xbox showed back in the 360 days as well. The reveal of the Xbox One is one of the greatest examples of getting up your own butt that we've ever seen, where they thought they were hot with the 360 because they competed extremely well with the PS3, and I think kind of slightly beat them out on sales. And then they got real dumb with the Xbox One, at least at launch. I still think the One X is the best system from the last gen, but that's just my opinion. And they got too proud, they got too cocky, and they put out a bad product, and Sony ran with it real hard, and I'm glad they did. So I know some people just need to realize that PlayStation is going to drip feed stuff through the whole year. They probably aren't going to have this big blockbuster summer show the way that the Xbox does at E3, and the way that Sony or Nintendo does is kind of a little bit, but Nintendo's a lot more like Sony than Xbox. So if people were disappointed with the state of play, it's only because they didn't pay attention. They made it very clear this wasn't going to be some big blockbuster show, and that's okay. I think that was very responsible of them and cool of them. So go PlayStation. It's talking about Xbox, the marketing thing. So there was a topic on the podcast I listened to recently that talked about how just how insanely good Xbox's marketing and PR has been, and I think that's 1,000% true. It has been on point. They've been killing that game. They've been doing it so well. Where they're like the cool dad or like the cool uncle, or like Sony and Nintendo are like your prudish aunt and your like jerk dad, and I think that's cool. And it's because, like I said before, Xbox is in the hearts and minds thing right now. They do have a great console. They do have the best game service in the world. I have a hard time hearing arguments otherwise. And they have great marketing. The thing they don't have yet right now is the best games. Sony has a chokehold on that, and honestly, Nintendo may even more so of that, even though they're kind of doing their own thing. And so there's this kind of question about whether or not, like, all this goodwill that Xbox gets from its social media and stuff like that, like, does that matter at the end of the day? And I think it does. Um, for a couple of reasons. The main reason being that it at least gets its mind share. Even if someone's not an Xbox fan, or if they're hardcore Sony or PC or Nintendo, they're at least hearing about Xbox. Xbox is making moves, whether they're effective or not, who knows? But they're at least trying something, and they're not just floundering like it kind of felt like they did through the whole Xbox One generation. Um, the real test or the testament, one or the other, is going to come here in like 3 years, when starting this fall, their goal is to release one big exclusive game at least every 3 months. And so you're talking about a year from now, a year and a half, 2 years from now, when they have a catalog of exclusive games you can only play with Xbox or on Game Pass. What will the conversation be then? So we know that Sony's still going to have their library of great games. But now we'll see whether Xbox kind of reviving and guzzing up their existing IPs and introducing some new ones, and introducing IPs from like Bethesda and things like that. Will that then start to get rid of the conversation of like, oh yeah, Xbox is dope at everything but games? And that's where, if they bring the games, then all this goodwill and all this PR and all this marketing is going to pay off, big time. But they have to bring the games. That's what everyone's waiting for. Every pundit, every person I know, every person I talk to, it's, yeah, Xbox does everything great. They have great hardware, they have great services, they have great everything, but they need those like 5 games, or really for the average player, they need like those 2 games. They need like they need 2 games that every gamer can latch onto. Now that requires having 10 to 15 great games or IPs exclusively on your console to try to get everyone on the same page, to try to give something to everyone. But we'll have to see. I think that's a few years away, and with games like Halo and Hellblade and Stalker, you've got, jeez, man, all the stuff that the Fallout, the Starfield, all those things. They're gonna have to bring that eventually, to make all these good feels pay off. Switching to not very good feels, or at least from what I can gather, the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo did their big reveal of the quote unquote new thing that's coming out, and a lot of people were expecting it to be a Switch Pro. That could output, at least like 2K or even 4K graphics, that would have this like super dope screen and a bunch of new features, be able to play all these new games that are coming and old ones at higher fidelity. And instead we got just a regular Switch with an OLED screen, and I think a little bit bigger battery. My favorite quote I saw about this, and people who were mad about it, is, I can't believe people are mad that the company who put out like 6 different Nintendo DSs is putting out a 3rd version of their Switch. That they are milking that baby, man. If you think that they have any reason or any desire to stop milking this gen, you're out of your mind, and you should expect to see Switches for years longer. I still think a Switch Pro will happen, and that seems to be the general consensus. But yeah, it will always amaze me that people will be surprised about game companies doing the things that those companies have always done. So personally, I'm actually interested in this Switch because I don't have one yet. I understand why someone who has a Switch Lite or the original one probably isn't interested in this, unless their system is getting worn down, or not quite doing its thing anymore. If Nintendo teased like the next big thing in Switch, it looks professional, and then they put this out, then people should be mad. Sure, that's fair. But there's so much of gaming, and maybe just life in general, but especially gaming, so much of the controversy and anger and stuff that happens in it is purely because of people setting unrealistic expectations on their own. Nintendo did not give any reason for people to believe that this was going to be something more than it is. That was YouTubers, that was journalists, that was, you know, talking heads. That was not Nintendo. So you can't be mad at Nintendo. You should be mad at these people who put out, you know, all these rumors and confirm things and all that. They're the ones who should catch some of that. But personally, I'm interested in this OLED thing. I think the wife or even the child eventually would be really into it. But I don't know if $350 is going to pull me in. The other thing that probably isn't going to pull me in is a new announcement about Assassin's Creed. So this started off as a leak and then was confirmed that there is a game or a platform being developed called Assassin's Creed Infinite. And what the basic idea of this thing is that it's going to be a ongoing Assassin's Creed experience, where it's just gonna be Assassin's Creed now, and they're going to introduce new characters and new stories and new worlds. But instead of it's kind of taken the Destiny form a little bit, where you'll have the base game will come out and then they'll just add to it, and we won't have these big releases anymore of, you know, Assassin's Creed Valhalla or Odyssey or whatever the next one's going to be. Now, realistically, this Infinite game is probably 2 or 3 years out. So I assume that next year and maybe one more time after that, we'll get a standalone Assassin's Creed game. I don't know. This worries me because maybe they're going to try to take this game back to its roots and, I don't know, actually have something to do with the Assassin's Creed main storyline. I know Valhalla kind of dipped back into it a little bit, but I still find it very unsatisfying personally. And it's just, they just keep making it's like, it's the way Breakpoint and Wildlands is to me with Ghost Recon. They made a game, they had an idea for a game that follows a bunch of trends that they are told by their stats that will sell really well and get lots of engagement, and then they slap an IP on it. So, you know, like Assassin's Creed Valhalla could be a really cool and deep Viking game made by Ubisoft that has nothing to do with Assassin's Creed, and it would be great, but they can't do that because that would require them to make an actual Assassin's Creed game that in some way resembles what that franchise once was. So instead of that, they just combine those two things. They take this idea they had, they slap Assassin's Creed on it. It's the same thing they did with Breakpoint. I would argue the same thing they did with Wildlands. And yeah, so I'm not big on this. I liked Origins, and I appreciated that it was an evolution of the Assassin's Creed, what it was. Then Odyssey came out, and I was starting to not really be a big fan of how level gated it was, how grindy it was. I still enjoyed the story, even though it essentially had nothing to do with Assassin's Creed. I understand it's like basically it does have something to do with it, but does it? Like, come on. And it started to really not feel like an Assassin's Creed game. And then Valhalla, I never even got through the prologue. I can't do it. It's just I don't like the characters, any of them. I don't like. I mean, it was two factors with Valhalla for me, of just not liking the way the game looked or felt, played. And then when reviews started coming out and it was like verified that you're talking about 60, 70 hours to just beat the main story, I don't, if I don't really love a game, I'm definitely not going to spend, 2 work weeks of time on it. I'm just not going to finish it. And that was, Valhalla was my worst purchase of games in the last like 3 or 4 years, easily. So I fear that this new Assassin's Creed Infinite is just essentially going to be an extension of what they've been doing with Valhalla, and they're just going to add and add and add. All the power to them. I hope it's successful for their financial purposes, but I'm really bummed that it just seems like I really wish Ubisoft, I made a tweet about this that some people seem to like a lot. I really wish Ubisoft was in the business of innovating and pushing forward and being a publisher that smaller studios or even big studios were copying. And instead, Ubisoft has just become this machine of, if a Ubisoft game is coming out tomorrow, look at that game, break down the mechanics, and you're probably looking at a game that is a bunch of trends from 3 years ago. And that's a bummer. That sucks. You know, and like from the trend point of view, I mean, it rings true with my favorite Ubisoft franchise, The Division. The first game, I can't prove this, but I have reason to believe that the first game was supposed to be much more of an actual RPG, in the vein of like almost like a Mass Effect style game. Not exactly. It was always probably gonna be a looter and stuff, but where like story wise and player progression wise, it was gonna look more like a game like Mass Effect. But it's very obvious, or at least I can surmise, that the Mass Effect 3 came out in 2012 or 13, which would have been right when Division 1 was getting deep into development. And unfortunately, I assume someone somewhere up the ladder was like, hey, instead of that, this Destiny game is interesting, just make that, and or try. But we're not going to fully support you, we're not going to give you all the resources, we're not going to let you have enough time, and we're going to cut you off early, especially when you do the sequel. Don't please don't focus too much on my bitterness here. So we want you to do that, but we aren't going to let you, we aren't going to give you all the resources to do it as well. And we're also going to have you do it to a franchise that has almost infinite possibilities. Good luck. So unfortunately, this is just a thing that Ubisoft does. I don't blame the devs. I don't really even blame the studios. They just do what they're told. I mean, the studios are basically the employees of the publisher when it comes to a company like Ubisoft. And at the end of the day, Big Daddy, Paris, Paris, France, Ubisoft headquarters gets to decide who makes what and how much time they get and how much money they're going to get. Again, I think I've said it before, but the reason that Division 2 content is, there's going to be a year and a half, 2 years between content drops, is because after Warlords came out, there wasn't supposed to be any more Division content. And I say that because the seasons were developed as part of Warlords. So after season 4, the game was supposed to be over, which, especially considering the lackluster way that season 4 ended, if that was supposed to be, I mean, oof. Especially considering we probably aren't getting a Division 3 for 3 or 4 years, if not more. So I don't know, man. Ubisoft, like, they love to promote their games. They love to talk about them before they come out. And then once they're out, they seem to just love to make devs struggle and then cut them off at the knees at some point. And it's really annoying. It's really a bummer. So hopefully this Assassin's Creed thing doesn't go that way. I will always hope that it's going to be successful and awesome and great. I will always be hesitant to believe it at this point. I just don't believe them anymore. I'll be excited about things they have coming. I'll still probably play Ubisoft games, but I admittedly have lost basically all hype for their games until I see something change. Let's see here. Escape from Tarkov 12.11. So they had a big new patch come out a week ago now, I think, as well as a new wipe, which is where all the characters people have been working on since December, I think. Last Christmas was the last wipe. It is all gone. They wipe your character 100% clean, and everyone starts over. This has been my favorite experience so far. Some big changes they made is that there's a flea market where you can buy and sell stuff to other real players. That always unlocked at level 10, and once you unlock that, the game kind of went into easy mode, because there's quests in this game that give you lots of XP, and that's the primary way you level up your character. There's 6 vendors, eight vendors in the game that you level up with experience and that you do quests for. They're the quest givers. And basically, and then you have like a home base that you can upgrade. And so those are the loops of the game, is doing quests, upgrading your upgrading your traders, and upgrading your home base. And in the way the game was before this wipe, once you hit level 10, you could streamline that process a lot. So this patch, they've actually bumped that up to level 20. And so many people have enjoyed it because it's made the game actually feel challenging and made that early game feel where people have crappy gear and stuff like that. It's made that last longer. Where in previous wipes, within a week or two, a lot of people are running like in the game gear, and it's just not very fun. So I really enjoyed this patch so far. The other big thing they added that I've really enjoyed is a system called Scav Karma. So when you scavs or scavengers are the AI in the game. The way this game works is you have your main character that you play as, and when you die, you lose everything, and um, you do your quest and stuff through this main character. So when you go in to play a round, it's a round-based game or a time-based, whatever, a session-based game. You can pick between your PMC, like your main character, or you can pick a scav, where it's a one-time use character. Again, if you die, you lose everything. It's kind of like it's like a safe character to play as or something. So that scav player, there's now a system in place where when you play as a scav, the AI in the game that are hostile to PMCs, to your main character, aren't hostile to you, or at least they shouldn't be. And now there's a system where there's a handful or more of things you can do that now there's scav reputation. So if you do good things to help other scavs and stuff like that, your reputation goes up, which means that your one-time use scav character, you'll spawn with better gear and better loot inside your gear. You'll spawn with better guns and armor, even to the point where eventually there's bosses on each map that you can become friendly with if your scav karma is high enough, and like use them to help hunt down people's actual PMC characters. And it's a cool system. Now, if you do mean things, if you kill other scavs, if you do all kinds of stuff that isn't very friendly, you lose scav karma. And the lower your scav karma is, it gets to the point where AI scavs will attack you immediately, and you'll spawn with like a pistol with like 3 bullets and no healing items and nothing. So it's been a really cool system. Honestly, it's my favorite part of the game at this point. Playing the actual quest and doing all that is fine. But actually, I've come to, at this point, I actually enjoy scavving and playing in that system more than the main game, because in the main game, it's kill on sight. You see something or someone, you kill them. Whether it's another player, whether it's an AI scav, whatever, you kill everything when you're a PMC. Anything you see, you kill it. But the scav system, it punishes that. So what you find, and what I've found, is in like 90% of my raids, I'll run into another player who's playing as their scav. You wiggle, you rock your player back and forth, or you kneel up and down, or you jump, or you can calm. There's no VoIP yet, but you can use voice comms, like recorded ones. And I've had a lot of success with trading items with people, running around with them. I actually played this morning for fun and was trading items with a guy where an unfriendly player scav sniped him and shot me in the leg, and I ended up running away. And I still got out with what I had, but it was really fun. So Tarkov, it's an intense game. It's a game that takes a good 6 months to get into. So I don't suggest it to everyone. But if you're looking for something to play, man, I mean, Tarkov is everything that Division Dark Zone could have been and should have been. It's, I basically just don't pay attention to Division PvP conversations anymore, or especially Dark Zone conversations, because it's just such a neutered, it's just such a whatever mode, in my opinion, compared to the alternatives that are out there, including a game like Tarkov. So if you want that hardcore heart racing experience, Tarkov's your game. You just have to have a PC good enough to play it, which is a whole different story. Okay, the last story here I'm going to talk about is all the Windows 11 information. So since the last time I podcasted, we did get an announcement about Windows 11. I have entered the beta program for it. I have not actually started using it yet, but I have been paying attention to and kind of checking out what they kind of have going on. And it looks cool. It seems more of like an iterative update. I don't really feel like Windows 11 seems like it's going to be this big, like, revolutionary thing for Windows, the way like moving from I really don't want to say XP to Vista because that was a downgrade in a lot of ways. But I really like Windows 10. I liked 7 as well. I actually never had a computer with 8 on it. Um, I'm excited. I think this stuff is cool. It does seem like there's a big focus on gaming and games, integrating Game Pass into it, which for me is really cool. But really, just gaming in general, it seems like there is a big focus on. And I'm always down for some new aesthetic, man. So, Windows 11, I do want to, try it out and maybe talk about it. I guess you can try it out in the developer mode, and then revert back to Windows 10 until they actually release 11. So I might try to do that. If you are going to do that, there has been a lot of talk about some security features that your computer has to have in order to have Windows 11. And I've seen some people saying that, like, oh man, my PC won't do it. If your PC is from like the last 5 or 6 years, it probably does. So just look into it. What I found was if you have an OEM computer, so like a laptop from Dell or a desktop from another, Alienware or something like that, the security feature that has to be on for Windows 11 is automatically turned on. If you made your own PC, it's probably just not turned on. I know for my purposes, the setting that you have to turn on for Windows 11, I didn't realize that my BIOS were 2 years old, so I had to update my BIOS to the current version, and then that option was in there to just turn on, and then I was able to be verified for Windows 11. So I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm curious. I think that kind of stuff is always fun. It looks like they're going to kind of update a bunch of apps that are kind of out of date. They better not take away my Windows Paint though, because I still use that thing all the time for content creation stuff. That and GIMP. So we'll see. Windows 11, big time. We have 2 listener questions, or questions from 2 people. So I have Master Prime on Twitter asking, are devs obligated to communicate with the community even when they have nothing to show? This is kind of talking about probably Division, but just in general. And the answer is no. There's no entitlement to anything. I think if a game is taking pre-orders and stuff, then maybe there is some obligation to show something. But in a big way, I just don't. I think it's okay for people to want stuff. I don't think it's realistic for people to expect stuff. Second part of Master Prime's question here is, with the new Massive Boss, should we worry about the future of the Division franchise? Maybe. I would like to be more positive than that. But from conversations I've had, it seems that Polfelt was a pretty big champion for Division. With the initiative that's happening with Division right now, where there's Division 2 content coming, there's Heartland maybe coming one day. There's a book, there's an audio book, there's a movie coming. All of those things point to that the Division franchise is healthy and respected by Ubisoft. Well, let's not say respected. Let's be straight up. Appreciated financially by Ubisoft is probably the better word. If they respected the Division, things would be different, but that's a conversation for a different day. So I hope, my guess with whoever is taking over for Massive is that it's going to be someone with a lot of experience pushing big AAA games, because right now Massive is working on 2 of arguably the biggest licensed IPs that Ubisoft has ever worked on, with Star Wars and Avatar. So I have to imagine that they're looking for someone. I assume that whoever takes over as the director of Massive, it's not going to be their first time being a director. So we'll have to see. I have a little bit of anxiety because there's this rumored game that's coming out. It's a first-person shooter PvP game that has like Division bad guys against Echelon, Splinter Cell, and wolves from Ghost Recon. It just sounds like a nightmare of ugh. It's just pure Ubisoft. I love Ubisoft. They've done lots of great things for me, and taking me to E3 and giving me early access to things, and I appreciate those things. But God, this rumored Division game that's coming, or Division involved game, just sounds like such a trash piece of crap. So I don't worry about the Division franchise in the sense that I'm positive Division games will continue coming out. I'm horrified for the Division franchise that it's going to turn into another Ghost Recon, another Assassin's Creed. From a sales point of view, that's a dumb thing to worry about because those games sell lots of games. But from a spiritual or a lore or a soul point of view, I'm not. I'm worried for sure. Thanks for the question, Master Prime. Michael Welter on Twitter asked, do you think the Division 2 should have more support? I know we're getting something, quote unquote, later this year. I wasn't a huge fan of seasons, although 3 and 4 were better. I think Division 2 could have done really well with Warlords and New York size expansions once a year. So that's kind of what I talked about back before when I was kind of talking about how like the original vision of Division, and then how they seems like they kind of pivoted and wanted to make it kind of like Destiny, but then they didn't really do it. And that's what I was talking about. Yeah, the Division franchise, if properly supported, in my opinion, and I'm talking about by like Ubisoft, not by Massive, because Massive just does what Ubisoft tells them to do, staffing wise and game wise. If Ubisoft let Massive just work on Division, not that they would want to, but if they did, if it was a Bungie like situation where Bungie only has to worry about Destiny and putting out content for it. I know they have another game in the works, but that's an expanded part of their studio. If Massive's only job was to put out Division games and content, I think it'd be their biggest franchise. But instead, Division 1 and Division 2 have been these situations where Ubisoft was so scared to fully commit to it and then didn't fully commit to it, but then kind of went back to it. In case I haven't explained it enough already, I just said it before. Warlords was supposed to be the end of Division 2, including the seasons. And then Warlords did so well that they decided they wanted more Division 2. This is Ubisoft, from what I'm told. They wanted more Division 2 content because it did so good. But they had already told Massive to allocate all of their resources to Star Wars and Avatar and this third AA game that they're making that's unannounced so far. And then they left. I don't even think there was a skeleton crew on Division 2 left. I'm under the impression that the reason that like Fei Lao's mission at the end was so lackluster is because it was just not finished. It was just, that's what they had ready, and they were told to leave the franchise and start working on these other projects. So I'm sure, like, I have no doubt in my mind that, Fei Lao's ending was supposed to be more complicated than it was, or more interesting, or at least better produced, rather than her just being another bad guy. Now let's kill her, even though she's already apologized, whatever. So yeah, Division 2 absolutely deserves more support. The Division franchise does. And that's why I'm scared that we see on one hand, we see the Division being treated like, it's less than, even though it sells as well as the best franchises for Ubisoft. They don't give it full funding, they don't give it full support, they don't give it full resources on one hand, but then on the other hand, you see them have these like 5, 6, 7 projects coming up that involve the Division, and that scares me because that means that they aren't willing to fully support the full AAA releases that come out, but they're happy to shovel a bunch of crap at us that they know we're going to buy because they know we love Division. And like if Massive was allowed to just focus on Division, we could get a Warlords of New York size expansion every year. Absolutely. If or if you ever get to talk to someone involved in the Division who made it or makes it, and they tell you about the way that Warlords was developed, it was done very quickly. And if you think about how quickly it was done, quickly in game dev sense, I'm not talking like in the real world. They didn't do it in a month. Took a long time, but not nearly as long as a lot of people would, as you may think. And but the reason that isn't going to happen is because Ubisoft won't let Massive do it. Without spilling any beans, I'm not allowed to spill. There were bigger plans for Division 1 and especially Division 2. But if Ubisoft doesn't allow those plans to go forward, that there's nothing Massive can do. Massive is a subsidiary. They do what they are told. So yeah, it's a bummer. The seasons were super underwhelming to me. I played through all 4 of them and I didn't mind them. I thought three was probably my favorite one, honestly. 4 seemed like it was going to be dope, and then it just wasn't, especially because of the ending. I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying to have faith. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I always post something on Twitter. You can always ask in the YouTube comments. You can even email me at my email address that's on my Twitter at Bondiesel or at the EchoCast. Yeah, ask questions. I love hearing from y'all, and I love getting topics and things to talk about from you. The final thing here, some content updates. As Bay Diesel's summer break kind of starts to hit its second half and approach its end, I do want to try to actually fulfill my plans to start streaming again, at least more consistently. Long story short, August is going to be very busy, at least the first few weeks. So yeah, so keep that in mind. But I would say end of August, early September, I want to start getting back on a schedule. 2-3 streams a week for 2-3 hours at a time. My goal is to do a morning on the weekends, an afternoon during the week, and a late evening during the week, or weekend, maybe kind of, so I can kind of hit the 3 different time zones that people watch in. I really wanted to play a fresh Division 2 playthrough. I think I'm finally getting ready. I think I'm finally ready to play that game again after a nice long hiatus. I want to grind Tarkov. Tarkov's tough on stream because you can only really get like at least the amount of time I stream. Maybe 3, 4, 5 raids in, and then you chat between raids, and but we can still hang. That's cool. And then there's a bunch of new games coming out. The Ascent and Microsoft Flight Simulator are the next ones coming that I'm excited about. But we're talking about Halo and Forza and all kinds of games that I would love to play on stream and hang out. So yeah, check that out. And on that note, I'm going to start wrapping things up. I am Bondiesel on Twitch, where I will start streaming there, I promise. So go there, give me a follow. I would very much appreciate it. You can donate to my Extra Life 2021 campaign at extralife.org/participant/bond_diesel. So check that out. You can also check out my Twitter at Bondiesel, or if you just want EchoCast and gaming stuff, you can check out at the EchoCast. If you want some EchoCast or Bondiesel merch, I have some new stuff up there, including some White Knights Have More Fun t-shirts. Please check out streamlabs.com/Bondiesel. That's all I have. So until next time.